Hello, welcome to LASFS Spotlight, an activity of the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society, this world's oldest science fiction club. One of the most important members of the society for many, many years was Forry J. Ackerman, editor, author, agent, big-name fan, and all-around punster. Forry traveled the world in the search of science fiction and to proselytize for it. He attended conventions, went to club meetings, went all over the world to see fans and meet with them. In the course of all of this activity, he generated many anecdotes. I recently sat down with Tom Khamis, one of Forry's many assistants and a longtime LASFS member, to share some of those Forry stories. Well, thank you for being with us today, Tom.
You're welcome.
I know that you came down to California to work with Forry as much as anything, or?
Well, I was born and raised in California. I came down from San Jose more. I guess you could say I did, in fact, move down here to work for Forry on weekends for volunteer work. But I mean, I had a job waiting for me. But when I look back, it was probably my main initiative.
Okay. And in the time that you were working for Forry, you got to hear a lot of his stories many times, I'm sure, if you're like anybody else that worked with Forry.
Yeah, the one that needs to be cleared up is that whole how he got to have amassed such a great collection, you know. And I know you've heard this story, is when he was, let's see, 1926, so I guess he was 10 years old.
It all began October 1926 with this issue of Amazing Stories, which jumped off the newsstand, grabbed hold of little 9-year-old me, and it spoke. It said, "Take me home, little boy, you will love me."
You will love me. And from there it grew, and his mother, about 2 or 3 years later, counted his magazines of just amazing stories, and he says, "Son, you realize that you have 27 of these magazines? I put them all in. By a grown man, by the time you're a grown man, you might have 100. And of course, he had about, as he said, 300,000 things, which was everything from an original King Kong dinosaur to a can of WD-40. So it's hard to say what 300,000 things are. Mm-hmm. But one of Robert Bloch's, actually I think it is Robert Bloch's last public interview, he corrected Forry on that whole story.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, and he said he wasn't driving down Santa Monica Boulevard, he was driving down Sunset Boulevard. And the year wasn't 1926, it was 1966, and the magazine was Hustler. But the thing is, I was at Forry's 80th birthday gala, as a lot of other people were, at the Friars Club in Beverly Hills, and they didn't have the heart to roast him, although he has been roasted before. And I don't know, a lot of you may know who Angus Scrimm, who played the Tall Man in the Phantasm series, is a very nice guy and a good friend of Forry's. He came up front, and he had his own slant on that story about the magazine jumping off the newsstand and grabbing hold of him. And he said, no, none of us had the heart to roast Forry. He says, but I would, and you look at, if you look at Angus Scrimm, he's one of these guys you really can't tell how old he is. And he said, I was that magazine's, Angus Scrimm was that magazine's seller. And he said, boy, that'll be 10 cents. And then I think later that year, Forry and I and a couple other people were having dinner actually at the Dresden restaurant with this Playboy model. What happened was we had a great dinner, and I whispered in her, I said, you should write an autograph that says, FJA, you take my breath away, and she accidentally misspelled it, breathe, so. But it turned out that Forry was having trouble breathing afterward because she did take his breath away. I said, Forry, what did you think of her? And he says, oh, wow. And I said, her brassiere jumped off the newsstand, grabbed hold of you, and said, take me home, little boy. And he said, no, that was Ed Wood. All right. So you and I were at Forry's memorial.
Right.
It was at the Egyptian. and it was very nice. Something that struck me when they showed Forry's face up there for the very last time, and he says sci-fi, which was fun. But what hit me was the people that were presenting their various stories on Forry. They said that Forry died on his own terms, and that he literally chose the time to pass away, is what they were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a much more romanticized view about Forry passing away. I thought that he would tell that story, Take Me Home Little Boy, one too many times, and this giant vaudeville cane would come down from the sky and pull him straight up. But you know, enough of that story. I think the one story that I've told people that they seem to never have heard before is after, well, let me say a little bit about Wendane Ackerman.
Okay.
Did you know her?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I knew Wendy.
Well, she was, when I was coming to the house in the late 80s, she was already incapacitated. She was kind of pretty much bedridden, sadly. And, you know, there'd be the doorbell ringing quite a bit, but see, Forry was already entertaining a lot of people at open house, so you can't do two things at once. And from upstairs, she would say, "Open the door," or "Answer the door," and he'd say, "I'm not a clone. I can't be two places at once," which I thought was the perfect science fiction couple argument.
Yes.
But they'd had a bit of an argument earlier where she said, "Act your age," and he said, "Well, if I acted your age, I'd be mummy dust." But, you know, she was like only 4 years older. But, you know, I don't think they were really having that much of an argument. It just so some ears it may have sounded that way. But what happened, sadly she passed away in 1990, and about I'm guessing 4 or 5 years later, Forry did have an intimate relationship with a lady that was, I believe she was in her 40s, and Forry was in his late 70s at the time. And Forry had told me that they were planning to move into her place, and he would have the house, he would still have the house, and he would have it open for sure on Saturdays, because that's when open house was when he was in town.
Right,
okay?
right.
And the whole thing sounded fantastic to me, because I couldn't imagine him doing that. But that's what Forry told me. And he said, well, she has a lot of money. She had a good job with one of the 7 majors, movie studios, and you know, attractive. And I said, "Forry, well, what happened?" He says, "Well, in one intimate moment, she asked Forry, he says, 'Do you love me?' He says, 'Well, yes.' And she says, 'Well, would you say that you love me madly?' He said, 'Well, no.' And that was it. And I said to Forry, he told me that story many times, and I said, the next time someone like that asks you if they love you madly, you say, 'I'm Peter Lorre, you're Francis Drake, this is mad love.'"
Yes.
But he didn't find that amusing, but anybody that heard that did find it amusing.
Yes, yes.
But no, I think that was counted as one of the loves of his life. I know Wendane was tops, but that did count as a love of his life, because he told me so.
Okay.
I want to take a little bit of time to talk about Forry's generosity. Going back to the 1930s and 40s, Forry was committed to doing an act that was completely selfless, and he had trouble, not his fault, but he had trouble doing that at times. But what was left after all of that were several decades of him being one of the most generous people that one could ever meet.
Mm-hmm.
And I have heard people say that Robert Bloch, Walt Dougherty, and Forry used to go to a restaurant till midnight and pun till the wee hours, right? And they say they were committing crimes against humanity. And I think it's a crime against humanity that no one recorded that. But I never tried to out-pun Forry, but I was thinking of some a couple of times I might have gotten the last word. At the end of his tour at the Acker Mansion, when he was living in Glendower, he would walk outside, and there was a perfect view of the House on the Haunted Hill, which was the Ennis Brown Frank Lloyd Wright building that they filmed The House on the Haunted Hill.
Right.
Okay,
right.
well, at least the exterior.
The exterior, yes.
Right. And he says, there's my greatest, prop. And it was a straight view of the House on the Haunted Hill, and it's even like the same angle
yes.
at part of the movie. And from Vermont and Los Feliz, if you clock your tachometer, it's 5/10 of a mile to Forry's Place, 2495 Glendower Avenue, and another 5/10 up to the House on Haunted Hill. So I said, I said, that's the House on Haunted Hill, and this is the halfway house on Haunted Hill. And if you're familiar with the movie, as I know you are, that is a triple entendre, but I got lucky on that one.
Yes, yes. Well, that is a great place to go out on for this segment. We'll have you back, because I know you have a lot more Forry stories to tell us. And I want to thank you for being with us. And I want to thank all of you people out there, all those fine viewers, to be sure and catch the next installment of the LASFS Spotlight, because you never know who's going to shine in the LASFS Spotlight.